Welcome to Momentum's virtual training series, where we invite expert facilitators to share their knowledge on topics that advance women in leadership.
Welcome everyone to our workshop this morning on fearless influence. I'm going to go ahead and share these slides with you. Not forget to do that part. There we go. Everybody see that and hear me, hopefully. Today, we're going to explore how you can amplify your leadership impact through building strategic influence. It's really about understanding how successful leaders drive change, whether you have formal authority or not, because sometimes we just don't have that. Before we dive in, I want to mention we'll be using the chat. I think Darla may have mentioned it. We're going to have some interaction in that chat, so if you'll make sure you have access to it. When there's interaction in the chat, there'll be, most of them are on blue slides, so you'll see that. And I'll give you some instructions when we get there. And there is a PDF in the chat that we linked to that was the assessment that we had done. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, you may want to pull that up as well. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Laura Huckabee-Jennings. I'm the founder and CEO of Transcend. With my degrees in physical chemistry from Princeton, and an MBA from INSEAD in France, and a master's from Jochi in Japan, my career journey spans a lot of different countries and a lot of different roles, including doing global brands at Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola, running a strategy consulting firm in Tokyo, and raising venture capital for tech startups. But in 2002, I founded Transcend. Our goal is to build inclusive, change-resilient organizations through strategic culture development. We were the first certified B Corporation in Alabama, demonstrating our corporate commitment to balancing profit and purpose. We help organizations transform through using evidence-based approaches that combine the latest research in neuroscience and behavioral economics with practical application. If you can't go out and do something, it's not really that useful. And our work focuses on three key areas: organizational culture, leadership culture, and change culture. We're going to talk mostly about leadership culture today. Our Fearless Leaders Masterclass and Fearless Teams programs have helped clients ranging from Toyota and NASA to universities and utilities build high-performing cultures where innovation thrives and psychological safety is the norm. What sets us apart from other people that looks like us is we've really been in your seats. We've all run P&Ls, led teams, and navigated complex organizations, and we bring that to your business, whatever its size. We understand the human side of business transformation. I'm excited today to share insights on how fearless leadership principles can help you and your organizations thrive in today's rapidly changing business environment. Let me start with why this topic matters, and I'm going to ask you to provide some input as well. So as you advance in your leadership journey, your ability to create impact increasingly depends not on your authority or what you're allowed to order people or organizations to do, but on your influence. It's especially true for women leaders. I know we've got at least one man on here, so it also applies to you. But women in particular often get caught up in very complex organizational dynamics, and influence is how you manage that effectively. Because ultimately, leadership is not about tasks and outcomes, although that may be part of what you're measured by, but it's about relationships and influence. That means at the end of the day, it's about emotions, because relationships are shaped by emotions. Leaders set the emotional tone for their team, whether they realize it or not. You've had those leaders who were super upbeat, and you've had those that were not, and it changed the tone and the feel of the team and the feeling of being there. Every decision you make, every interaction you have, every behavior models an emotional ripple effect that affects morale, motivation, and performance of the team. We call it emotional leadership. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. Because if you're not managing emotions, both yours and others, you're actually not leading. So let's start by understanding who's in the virtual room today. You've been putting a bunch up here on our chat, but I wanted to ask you to do this in the chat for me if you would now. What best describes your current leadership situation? If you'll just put in the letter that applies to you in the chat. A is I lead a team with direct authority, so people report to me. B, I lead a cross-functional project where I don't have direct authority, but I have to lead. I influence upward to senior leaders. I primarily influence my peers, or I'm preparing for a leadership role where I'll have to exhibit influence. Oh yeah, lots of A's, some C's, some B's. I see a lot in here. And you can't have more than one, right? C and E, C and D, A and B. Awesome. I appreciate you guys getting started here. As part of our warm-up, usually for these exercises, and it's actually a key influencing skill, we like to start with what we call a one-word check-in. So we're going to try something called a chat waterfall for this one. We're going to use it a couple of times today, so I'm going to get you to try this with me. When I give you the exercise, you're going to go ahead and type the word in, but you're not going to hit send until I tell you 3, 2, 1, send or go. And then we'll all send together. So we'll see them all arrive on the chat together. Everybody with me? All right. So here's the exercise. So I want you to check in with yourself and identify one emotion you're experiencing in this moment. You may be feeling several things, so just pick one. There's no pressure for it to be positive or anything in particular. Whatever you come up with is fine. And we ask that there are some commonly used words that are not actually emotions, like okay, good, bad, tired, busy. We'd like you to not use those words because they're not really emotions. They're kind of papering over the underlying emotion. There are hundreds of different emotions you can experience. So pick something that feels true to you in this moment. So, for example, one emotion I'm feeling in this moment is grateful. So go ahead and type your answer, but don't hit send yet. I'll give you just a couple of minutes. Don't overthink it. All right, 3, 2, 1, hit send. Oh, look at that. Awesome. Thank you. It's great to see all the things you guys are working on and feeling in this moment. So, knowing and naming your own emotions is a fundamental part of building leadership. So, congratulations. We took one step already today. So let's talk a little bit about the fearless influence framework. So I want to talk and do a couple of definitions quickly. So what is fearless exactly? Because it's our company's the fearless company, we use this definition, which is fearless is a conscious choice to respond with courage and purpose despite uncertainty and risk. It's not without fear. It means moving beyond fear and acting with purpose and courage anyway. So that's how we think about this. And when we think about a fearless leader, we use this acronym called CLEAR. So, using that courage and purpose, fearless leaders create trust, they lead by example, they elevate others, they accelerate innovation, and they reimagine tomorrow. And influence skills are a core part of this leader's toolkit. When we think about authority, influence. That paradigm we're going to explore a little bit today. What is authority? What is influence? Authority is something that relies on positional power. So it's often a title or a budget or a team or something that you have authority over. It's the ability to direct others based on your role. It's often limited to your direct reports and focuses a lot on compliance rather than commitment. And it can be really great in many circumstances, particularly if you're looking for some short-term results, right? If we have a fire in the building, I'm not going to try to influence you. I'm going to say, get out of the building. There are moments like that in every business where authority is needed. Influence, on the other hand, is really based on relationship power. How do I make you feel? Do I inspire you? Am I helping you connect the work we're doing to your own values? And I can affect your actions and your thinking through building trust, through my communication skills, and through building connection with you. It extends a lot beyond reporting lines and creates more sustainable change. So, long term, even if you have positional authority, you also need influence to be at your most effective. So the core limitations of authority-based leadership, if you don't have the influencing skills to go with it, is it reduces your intrinsic motivation. You've worked for that boss that expected you to just do what they told you all the time. Maybe not the most fulfilling role you've ever had, but those people exist. It creates some dependency because if you're being told what to do, the people who are hearing that don't have to think for themselves. And they can get used to that over time and they're not making their own independent decisions. With influence, we're giving them some scope to make decisions themselves. It often limits the information flow because we're not communicating fully as much as we can. It can create resistance because people naturally resist sort of being controlled, which leads to compliance without real commitment. They're not emotionally in the game. And then finally, it diminishes trust. So if you rely on authority too much, it can erode that trust. It creates an us and them mentality, the decision makers and the doers. And that really can create some problems over time. So at Transcend, we believe fearless leaders understand the distinction between authority and influence and develop their influence capabilities intentionally because it's often the more powerful skill to have. As your career evolves from technical expert through to people leader to enterprise influencer, you need your influence skills to increase dramatically. So I'm going to illustrate kind of what this can look like. The higher you rise in a hierarchy, the less you can actually rely on authority alone. So I don't know how many of you run organizations, but if you've ever been a CEO of something or run a big business unit, can you just tell your direct reports what to do? You can, but it's not the smartest idea, right? Because we really know we want buy-in from even the folks that report to us in order to make something truly effective. So influence skills remain very important. If we think about this technical expert, they're really being valued for their deep expertise and individual contribution to the organization. They might, be measured by cases completed, revenue earned, projects completed, budget used, things like that. But now they shift to a people leader, and it's about the team and not about the individual. So you have to shift from doing the work to enabling others' work, right? So you're being measured now by the success of the team or team velocity. How much capacity is the team demonstrating? The keys there are learning to delegate and develop others, and then really shifting your mindset to about the team. That next big step is again an influence step again. So you're not talking about just your team, but you're looking across the organization, across different functions, and building networks across the functions and hierarchies in the organization. And now you're being measured by whether other people that don't report to you actually did something with whatever initiative you're trying to make happen. So point when you have to start developing a much more strategic perspective beyond what is my group responsible for, but how did it fit into the whole? And then finally, this highest level is really learning how to lead without authority. Because although a CEO or president can tell people what to do, they generally don't. They're looking for people to follow without telling them what to do. So you're shaping the organizational direction, you're influencing your peers and other senior leaders without any formal power or in spite of not using that power, and building consensus. That's a really high level influencing skill because you're driving change. The name of the game these days is about leading change, and leading change is all about influence. So, so why is influence important today? Because really it matters more than ever. A couple of key shifts have happened in our organization. So first of all is define influence, which is the ability to affect someone's thoughts, behaviors, or decisions without force or coercion. That authority can be perceived a little bit more like force or coercion. You pay somebody on your team, you could do something if they didn't comply. This is more about not using those tools and about convincing them it's the right thing to do and getting them to want to do it. And that fearless influence specifically is referring to the capacity to create those meaningful impact through those authentic connection, principled conviction, which is about your values and what you stand for as a person, as an organization, and courageous communication, which can mean engaging in that difficult conversation, tackling the person who disagrees, even in the face of uncertainty and resistance. So we're going to talk a lot more about resistance and how do you overcome it today, and how do you use your influence skills to do this. You see more coercive tactics sometimes, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a principle-led version of influence. And this is why it matters, because I hope you see this in your own organizations. I know I see it in lots of places, that organizations are generally flatter, and there's a lot more matrixed organizations and networked based organizations. So there's less top down anyway. And when you see this less hierarchical structure, you've got to work across functions, teams, and even external partners to achieve results. There's a lot more project-based work, which is similar across functions. And then remote and hybrid is not going away. It may fluctuate up and down, but remote and hybrid requires a completely different set of skills. Distributed teams require different approaches to influence. And leaders have not always had the training to do that. So you see people who really want everybody back. Sometimes it's because they don't really know how to lead well with a team they can't see. The pace of change is increasing, so it requires more rapid alignment. If you have to wait for a top-down decision, it just takes too long. So that influencing and get it done from the middle is part of what we need. And finally, the workforce. People just respond better to being influenced than they do being directed. So particularly with the younger generations and knowledge workers, engagement comes through meaningful connection rather than positional authority. The research tells us that leaders who have higher levels of influence skills get better results based on cross-functional initiatives, and they have higher team engagement. Wouldn't you all like that? They're not just soft skills. We call them core skills because they drive hard business outcomes. So don't call them soft skills if you can help it. And particularly for women leaders, developing strong influence skills allows us to create impact regardless of whether the organizations fully recognize our authority, which can be an issue sometimes. So the big differences between authority and influence. Authority is position centered. It relies on your formal role and works through directives and decisions. Its reach is somewhat limited because it's what you have scope of authority over in an org chart. And it depends on them being compliant to what you've asked. Write the report this way, do this thing. Influence, on the other hand, is relationship centered. So it doesn't matter where you are on the org chart, you can have influence. It works through connection and collaboration. When you have to get someone to do that's outside your direct silo, your function, you need to get someone above you in the chain of command to do something, you must use the influence skills. The most effective leaders really know how to use both appropriately, but influence is ultimately the more versatile and sustainable approach. So, question for you guys. How do you typically approach influence situations? You've got to influence someone to do something. I want you to put in the chat the number that applies for you. So, number one is present compelling data and logical arguments. Are you that person? Do you build your one-on-one relationships first? Do you work on recruiting powerful allies first or a sponsor? Do you connect to organizational priorities? Here's how it fits in our strategic plan. Or are you just really persistent with follow-up and tenacity and make sure you go to people as often as you can to get your initiative done? Oh, I see lots of ones and twos. One and two. Okay, yeah, lots of ones and twos. Oh, excellent. There's a five. Shauna, thank you. Yeah, or Shauna maybe. Jasmine. Okay, yeah. So one and two are really common in this group. It looks like compelling data and logical arguments. Great. So we're an analytical group generally, and one-on-one relationships. So that might lead me to believe that that's your skill of the group, is doing more one-on-one relationships. It gives us all some insight into your natural influence approaches if you know which one you lean on the most. So let's talk about how we apply this fearless influence framework in some different situations. So I've got a 2x2 matrix here, every consultant's friend, that has on the horizontal axis how strong or weak your relationship is with the person you're trying to influence. And the vertical axis is how much are they going to resist your idea. So I'm trying to get something done. What's my relationship with this person like, and how resistant are they to what I'm trying to propose? So when you have a strong relationship and low resistance, our bottom right quadrant, because direct influence works really well. You can be straightforward about what you need. The person already likes and admires you, respects you. So you can just tell them what you're trying to do. And they're not going to have a lot of resistance there. If that strong relationship person, however, has high resistance, because you have a relationship, you can engage in collaborative problem solving. So you're working through the disagreements and exploring concerns together using that relationship capital you have with that person. On the weak relationship side, so these might be people you just don't know very well, or your relationship's been a little contentious over time. We have to start with that low resistance, low relationship or weak relationship. Really what we're talking about now is relationship building first. We need to get to know them and understand their concerns before we can present our idea. We're giving them a chance to get to know and trust us, so our idea, can get some traction there. And then this last one, where you have a weak relationship and you expect high resistance. Now we go to coalition building, because you're not going to necessarily be able to bring this person on board by yourself, but who do they listen to? Who else do they admire, who might help you build relationship and understand how they're going to approach this? So all of this is part of your mapping of what is the relationships that you need to influence and how should you go about doing it. So another thing you want to think about, and this is part of that PDF, if you manage to look through that and assess yourself ahead of time, you'll see some of these influence styles in there. If you're a builder, if your primary approach is to build trust, you're going to work best and that's going to work best for you in high stakes situations when you have skeptical stakeholders. Building trust is the name of the game. If that's not your strength, you're going to have to learn to build some more of those skills. If you're a natural connector, so building the message and communicating is going to be better when you're trying to translate between different functions like technology and customer service. That connector person is going to help bridge the gap on how do we communicate effectively. And our strategist finally is going to do best when there's a really complex environment. You're going to have to analyze and spend a lot more time. We're going to do a couple of complex situations today on the call, so you can see what that looks like and how you might approach it. But that's going to be better when there's a lot of organizational politics. And we all know, that happens for a variety of reasons. People are measured differently. They have different priorities, and then we get politics. So the last thing you're going to do is a stakeholder influence map. Anybody ever seen one of these? So there's you in the middle and you're trying to do something. And what you do is you find all of the people who are going to be necessary for you to be successful in whatever your initiative is. So this is one way of analyzing that. You put the people and you color code them based on their likelihood to support your initiative. The red's high resistance. I've sort of done a red, yellow, green. Our CHRO over there in the gray is neutral. Our green are positive and supportive. And we actually have a champion over there in legal in this one. And the lines between show the strength of your relationship to these folks and sometimes their relationships to each other. And that helps you figure out if I don't have a great relationship with let's see, maybe customer service is good, but maybe I'm trying to get to that safety director. I need to work on my relationship with this GM of North America who can help me influence the safety director. So that might be someone I would map. Creating a similar map from your situation can reveal different pathways of influence you might otherwise miss. Helps you see how do you go around and actually be successful, not necessarily when direct doesn't work very well. All right. Any questions coming up so far? I haven't seen any. All right. So if you guys are okay with it, we're going to do a case study. Everybody good? And then we're going to ask you to work on your own. Okay. So my case study, this is a real story. It's a lady from Citibank. I'm going to kind of read it to you in case you can't read the tiny writing on my slide. So Sarah Chen, she joined Citibank as a digital systems specialist. She had a strong technical background. And after 6 years of technical excellence, she was promoted to lead digital transformation for the Asia Pacific region. So she's out in Asia. While respected for her expertise, Sarah faced a significant challenge. She had no direct authority over the 12 department heads whose cooperation she needed. This was her first major cross-functional leadership role that required influencing without authority. Sarah would describe herself as naturally analytical, like all of my ones, and somewhat introverted, like a lot of our twos. Her previous successes came from technical knowledge and logical arguments. Sound familiar? Now she faced a seasoned department head, some of them with 20 years of experience, and she has 6 who are very skeptical about yet another digital initiative, another software package, another program they're going to have to implement. What was particularly challenging for her was the diverse regional stakeholders in the landscape. So the Singapore operations group was welcoming the innovation, but Malaysia was more tradition oriented. Finance was concerned about the return on investment. What are we doing? And IT security was worrying about compliance risks. Everybody got the situation? I want you to put yourself for a moment in Sarah's shoes. And I'm going to put you back in the chat. We're going to do the influence mapping, Tracy. If you were in Sarah's position, what would be your first move to influence the 12 resistant department heads? If you'll type just the letter, schedule one-on-one meetings is A. Present compelling data on customer pain points is B. C, find an executive sponsor. D, create a pilot with the supportive department. Or E, build a detailed business case. Lots of A's, D's, E's. Okay, A and D, all right. These are all great moves. The question is, what would you do first? C, A, okay. Excellent. So let's see what Sarah did, shall we? So someone asked for the influence map. Here we go. This is not all 12, but this is a subset of the folks that she had to influence. So the first thing Sarah did was map all the stakeholders. Notice how they're color coded again. We've got resistance from the finance CFO and Malaysia operations. We have some supporters in Singapore, the customer service group. The chief marketing officer is a champion for this. She didn't start with presentations or trying to convince anybody. Her first fearless move was to deeply understand the landscape. What is she walking into, and therefore, what does she need to do? If you look at the lines connecting Sarah to each stakeholder, these thicker lines represent stronger relationships. So the CMO, she's got a very strong relationship with that person. But she started with one-on-one coffee meetings with everyone, even those showing the highest resistance, like our CFO and our Malaysia operations. When she described this approach, she said, I needed to understand their specific concerns before I could address them. So try to understand what you're walking into. She actually approached her journey in 3 phases. So if you look across the bottom, you'll see phase 1 was her initial assessment. We're going to start with 2, which is those individual coffee meetings. So it's understanding the landscape is this beginning. Ask primarily about their priorities and pain points, not about the digital initiative, right? What's already happening in their world. Created that detailed stakeholder map with motivations, concerns, and potential allies and resistors. So she wouldn't have even known the CFO wasn't a fan of this unless she'd gone and spoken to that person and gotten some sense of what they were worried about. And her fearless move here was to actually meet with the most resistant stakeholder first and address their concerns, right? I lived in Japan, what we call this sort of movement called nemawashi, or root binding. We're trying to find all the stakeholders and bring them in, understand their concerns so we can address them. Phase two for her was building coalitions. So she's got this map. She identified the three departments that had the most to gain from this. So marketing, customer service, and then the Singapore operations and a little bit of HR. She facilitated some problem solving sessions focused on their specific challenges so she could work on helping them see how this would help them even more. And then she created some cross-functional working groups with representatives from the supportive departments. So start with the people that are in favor and figure out why they're in favor. Her fearless move was she did invite departments that wanted it, but the skeptics to critique these early proposals, incorporating their feedback. So your supporters build a proposal, the skeptics critique it, we iterate, we pull it back. So we're addressing these concerns from our critics all along. In phase three, she's trying to expand her influence. So she took the early adopter success once they implemented, and they created some success metrics around what this did for them. So it's her version of creating FOMO, or fear of missing out, in some of those other departments where they're like, man, I want that results too. Maybe I should think about this digital initiative a little more carefully. She also created some department specific ROI calculators that showed personalized benefits. What did they care about? How did it affect their key performance indicators or KPIs? And then she did peer-to-peer showcases. Instead of putting herself as the champion, she let the people who had already had success be champions to the people who were skeptical. So it wasn't a top-down presentation, but it was peer-to-peer. Her fearless move was setting up digital transformation office hours so that she could provide individualized support to the departments who were struggling or had specific questions. But her journey wasn't smooth. You can imagine putting yourself in her shoes. There was the most challenging was actually the finance department. The CFO was skeptical about ROI timeline and concerned about resource allocation. So, question for you in the chat. If you're facing the resistant finance department, what approach would you take? Just in 3 or 4 words, what would you do? How would you talk to them? And then I'll tell you what Sarah did. Budget versus ROI. Yeah. Okay, Lindsay. Who else has got something they would do? Supply them with detailed information. Sure. They would want facts, figures, projections, find out what their concerns are or hesitations. Yep. We've had that first conversation, but they're continuing to have concerns. Sure. The remaining concerns, long-term benefits and ROI, immediate benefits of our plan. Mm-hmm. A one-on meeting, focus on working through their concerns instead of trying to persuade them immediately. All great ideas. Absolutely. Explain why this will help them. So let's talk about what Sarah did and how it worked for her. So we're back down to Sarah's influence strategy. She, rather than continue to push data or working around finance, so data, some of you submitted, but they already have data. What she really did is she invited a respected member of the finance team to co-develop a measurement framework. So how are we going to judge success? And you enroll someone in the finance department to help you get ownership from finance on how success will be measured. So when you do measure it by their metrics together, you can show that it's success. And that helped them become advocates. What are you laughing about, Darla? Buy-in. Thanks, Rosalind. So she faced actually similar. Go ahead, Darla.
Oh yeah, we were going to say that. No, we weren't really. This is phenomenal. We are loving this. We're taking notes like crazy over here, Laura. This is fantastic.
Great. I'm glad. I try to make it practical as part of our ethos is to make it something you can use.
I'm even sitting here thinking how this could even work, not just in corporations, but in every situation where there is more than one person making decisions. It's going to affect everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your nonprofit, your school, your family, there's lots of places you can put this to use. Sarah also had similar resistance from the IT operations over there. The IT security, you'll see in orange. They were blocking progress because they had compliance concerns. Everybody's all about IT security these days. And this is the bank. Instead of arguing with them about what the requirements should and shouldn't be, she actually facilitated them talking to the external vendor. So that those engineers could talk to the security team directly, and they engineered a solution everybody was happy with and actually was more secure than what IT had initially insisted they have. So enrolling people, making them part of the process is a big piece of it, giving them some agency, right? Data alone, all of our data people Data is great, but data does not necessarily change how people feel, and it's changing how people feel that will get them on board. So Sarah's outcomes, I mean, she was hugely successful. She had impressive results. She got 85% adoption across departments. The goal had been 70, so she was actually way ahead of the game. It translated to $12 million in operational savings for the organization, with customer service saw a 30% reduction in processing time, and marketing got access to real-time customer insights that improved campaign performance. So beyond the metrics, she achieved something a little bit more valuable, even a new collaborative culture. So when you start bringing people together, the department heads who'd formerly not had relationships started working in these task forces and teams. They began working together on other initiatives and sharing information and discussing their challenges. As one of her bosses said, this wasn't just a digital transformation, it transformed how they collaborated. And for Sarah, this was really transformative for her leadership approach, because she'd been that data person like many of us. She learned that data wasn't sufficient. She became a leader who led by building connections that enable change, that it's all about the human aspect of change. The data is important, but it's insufficient. And her reputation shifted from being a technical expert to a strategic leader, often something we're looking for as we progress in our career. So it wasn't finished. So she still had to work with legal and Malaysia operations that continued to show resistance. So she continued to have to build relationships and continue that ongoing influence to maintain momentum. So none of these initiatives that you put in are one and done. Think about how you're going to sustain it over time. And those relationships may bear fruit for another initiative later, but you can't just expect to walk away. All right. Now you've heard what Sarah did. Back to you. Which of her tactics would you apply in a situation you're currently facing? Think about your own world and something you're trying to influence. I've given you these 5 options. So stakeholder mapping, cross-functional working groups, department-specific benefit calculators, leveraging early adopters and champions, or setting up office hours for individualized support. A, B, C, A, D, E at this point. Yep, absolutely. B, A, D. Excellent. A lot of good answers in here. I go back to Mrs. Darla. She created trust through respecting others. Yeah. So all of us want to be respected in whatever it was we do. And sometimes we have to demonstrate respect people. You don't have to always like them. You don't have to be their best friend, but you have to respect them and treat them, with professional integrity and respect. Great. All right. So let's talk about your personal influence assessment. If you didn't get a chance to do it, it's that PDF that was in the link in the chat earlier. So you can pick it up now. And you can do it later if you don't have time at this moment, but I'd encourage you to take a look at it, because it looks at basically 3 components of your influence, because we want to take a look at you and how you're going to influence, because you'll come to each situation with your own personal strengths and weaknesses. And how do you, first of all, understand them so you can use them effectively? And then places where you might be weak, how do you shore yourself up? So it looked at 3 things. First of all, your relationship style, how you naturally build and leverage connections. Do you primarily build influence through trust and reliability as a builder, through skilled communication as a connector, or through strategic network development as a strategist, or some combination of those? They would have given you an answer of what your primary would be. The second thing it looked at was your influence tactics. Which specific tactics do you use the most? So what comes naturally to you? Coalition building, evidence providing. All of our data people, the evidence providing is probably a strong suit for many of you, or vision connecting. And third, your situational strengths, which will be things that are specific to context in which you perform well. So do you do better with particular audiences, more senior audiences, more global audiences, more technical audiences? Is there a particular audience type where you're most effective? The formality, does it matter? Do you like really buttoned up board presentations where you can be influential, or do you prefer the coffee meetings? Is that easier for you to connect and really have influence? And do you want something that's super high pressure, super visible, and very short on time? Does that bring out the best in you? Or are you better when you have a little bit more scope to do things in a more thoughtful and deliberate way? So understanding each of these elements helps you leverage your natural strengths and identify areas for growth, because guess what? You don't get to be just one thing all the time. You want to know what your natural go-to is and get really good at it, but you're also going to have to figure out how to do a little bit of each of the other things. So let's talk about what it means. particularly the influence style, your relationship style. We're going to start there and really have a conversation about it. And you'll notice I'm going to talk about where it's most useful. And at the bottom, I've got what we call our fearless move, because when we finish, I'm going to ask you to take some action from what we talked about today. And I'm going to call it your fearless move. What's the thing you're going to do that's going to take this forward for you? Maybe a little bit trepidatious for you, feels risky, but the thing that you're going to go ahead and do. So if you're a builder, if you came up as a builder, you create influence through trust and reliability. People follow your lead because they can count on you to deliver. Your fearless move involves extending trust first in some new relationships, even when it feels risky, because that's not going to be super easy for you, but you're going to need to go in and extend trust first. If we want others to trust us, the first move is trust first. If you're a connector, so you influence through skilled messaging and emotional intelligence, your ability to speak others' language creates alignment. Your fearless move is having the difficult conversation that other people are avoiding and bringing hidden issues to light. You'll be skillful in doing this. Everyone avoids those difficult conversations. Your strength is going to be to tackle them, get in there and ask good questions. If you're a strategist, you're going to build your influence through thoughtful relationship mapping and network development. Those are the folks that looked at that mapping and said, oh, yes, I need that, or who've maybe already done them for yourselves. It's going to be how you think about a complex stakeholder environment. Your fearless move is going to be intentionally cultivating relationships with people who challenge your thinking. We all believe that we're really smart and often quite right. We're often wrong. And we don't really know how wrong until we engage those people who disagree with us. And that's going to be that fearless move, is engaging with the skeptics, the people who are resistant to what you're trying to do. Many of you likely have a blended style with elements of multiple approaches. That versatility is super valuable, although you still have probably one thing that's more dominant for you. And they start to create a signature pattern. If you looked at the last part of that assessment, it really gave you some things that come together. So if you're a natural coalition builder, and you create support networks, right? If you're a vision connector, you link initiative to broader organizational goals. So we'll look at those things as well, which is off to the chat. So based on your reflection and the assessment, which relationship style feels most natural to you? If you'll put in builder, connector, strategist, or blended. Blender, yeah, connector, builder, lots of builders, yep. There's no wrong style. They're all important. Connector, strategist, builder, yeah. Excellent. There's a diverse range of strategies in this group. That's really terrific. Fantastic. All right. So if we, so beyond the relationship strategies, we have the tactics that you use. And so in your influence toolkit, you'll have a range of tactics that were also on this assessment for you to decide which ones you use most often. This is the list, and this is kind of a definition of what some of these are: coalition builders, vision connectors, problem solvers. You probably do all of these things, but if you look at this particularly, leave this list for just a second. I want you to pick out the one you're most skilled at using. We're going to put it in the chat in just a minute, but don't do it yet. And then I want you to think about the one that you need to develop the most. And this list is also in the assessment, because I'm going to take it down and put you in the chat. So in the chat, this is the waterfall. Remember, everybody types, but don't hit send. I want you to write in the chat the one influence tactic you're most skilled at using. Pardon my dog. Oh, don't hit send yet. All right, everybody got something? 3, 2, 1, go. Hit send. Oh, look at that. Lots of problem solving. So for me, that fits really well with that data approach that a lot of you mentioned. Problem solver, connector, some blends, yeah. Some connecting, inspiration catalyst, yes. Yes. Again, there's no right answer. All of these are helpful things. All right. And then the next one, to become more fearless in my influence, I need to develop my ability to, which one do you most need to get better at? And you can just go ahead and type that one in. Vision, strategic network. Yeah. Problem solve. Okay, there's some people who can help you with that right here on the chat. Okay, that's great. So some people's most needed is other people's strength. See how this works? If you go find somebody who's really good at the thing you're not as good at yet, go find them. So these growth areas are going to be important as we move into developing your personal roadmap, which is the last thing we're going to do here today. Strategy. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about how do we take this and build a roadmap. So we're going to try to translate the insights from that brief personal assessment into actions. Remember, it's all about action. This is not a listen to things and walk away with an idea. It's figure out an idea that actually is going to make a difference for you and then putting it in action after you leave. So this tool is going to help you think about the things we discussed. First thing you're going to want to do is build your own influence landscape if what you're trying to do is complex. Now, if it's only involving a couple of people, this may not be necessary. But if you're dealing with, 6 or more people that are going to influence the success of your work, you probably want to do this map and figure out who's in favor and who's not. People who aren't in favor, how could you influence them? What other relationships do they have? What do they care about? How do you find out? And that's going to help you create a roadmap. So I have both a Word and a template like this that I can send you after. My email address will be, it's in the assessment that's there. Feel free to send me an email. If you email me, I'll send those to you afterwards. We're just going to look at them today. So let's look at the key components of our roadmap. So the first thing is your personal influence vision. So this is a 30-day impact assessment. So in 30 days, here's the impact I want to create. I want you to have a clear, bold charge of what it is you want to create through influence. Something you can't just go do. It's not a you thing. It's a I need others to help me with or buy into something I'm trying to do. You're going to identify the stakeholders, who specifically needs to be influenced in order for you to achieve that. And then you're going to pick out your unique influence strengths from the assessment that we worked on and that you've got in that PDF. The heart of your roadmap is the strategic action section, which is those 4 squares in the middle. So you'll want to have an action under relationship building. And to keep yourself accountable, there's a date and what it should look like if you're successful. One under coalition building, and the other one under impact demonstration, which is our data piece that we all love, or many of you did. Our support structure on the right and the progress metrics at the bottom really ensure that your plan is sustainable. Who cares, who helps, who will support you. And I've actually got an accountability partner down there because that often helps. If you pick somebody and say, I'm going to account with you, you're going to hold me accountable. It gives you a chance to do it. And then finally, you have a fearless commitment, which is an action you're going to take in the next 7 days. This is not over the next year, people. This is like now, I'm going to do it in the next week. So that's what goes on your influence roadmap. And here's an example of, one that I filled out so it can look like this. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but a fearless action for supporting a new customer feedback process under relationship building means coffee meetings one-on-one with primary stakeholders regarding their pain points, priorities, and challenges that I need to address, right? And I've got a date on it. And success looks like a clear understanding of stakeholder concerns. So you create that for each of your pieces. I'm going to have some metrics I'm going to look at, and my commitment is in the next 7 days, I'm going to approach the IT director to understand his concerns rather than trying to work around him or convince him with data alone. So what's your version of that? So I hope that you're writing furiously and creating your own. If you're not, we're going to talk about some things that make this more successful. So as you work on this for yourself, on a change you want to make, because this is about how we build our influence skills by practice influencing. So you need something you can practice. It doesn't have to necessarily be high stakes, but pick something you want to influence and try this. So you have to make it something specific and meaningful. If it's not specific, we won't know whether or not you did it. And if it's not meaningful, you won't care whether you did it or not. Include your stakeholders and think about who might not be obvious, but has a real influence. It's not necessarily the person you need to implement something, but who else is involved? We often forget support functions that are going to be part of this process. We're doing some digital transformation for a client right now, and IT thought that they owned this project. It's like, well, good for you, but what about customer service? What about finance? What about operations? And it's like, yeah, they all are going to touch this in the end, and so they're stakeholders that are super important in finding who those people are. Ensure your strategic actions are concrete steps and not vague intentions. We often talk about goal setting. If it's not something you can, touch and feel and know whether or not you did it and put it on your calendar, it's probably not specific enough. And then be realistic about your timeline. If you're picking something that can't possibly be done in 30 days, try to break it down to something shorter. And the final thing, as you look at your strengths, try to choose those fearless actions that leverage your strengths, but also stretch you just a little bit in some of those new directions you said you wanted to work on. The most important thing is not completing this perfectly, because it's a living document. You're going to come and update it and change it as you continue to develop. But you really want the vision statement to really be important. And you want to make sure your fearless commitment is concrete and that you can do that. Any questions on this? Like I said, I can send you that document. If you'll just email me, I've got them ready to go. You can have both of these free for you to use. Hopefully it helps you build influence. All right. So I'm going to talk about our key takeaways here and ask you guys to commit to some things. We're going to look at those because hopefully I've convinced you by this point that the key to successful leadership today, particularly senior leadership, the more executive you go, is influence and not authority. I can give you the title and the budget tomorrow, but if you don't have influence skills, it's going to be very difficult to execute on the role. So you need to develop it now. It's going to also help you stand out for that leadership role you might be aspiring to. It's going to help you succeed more than the one you have. Yeah, true for every level. Absolutely, Tressie. Doesn't really matter where you are. It's always true. Key takeaways for today. And then I'm going to ask you if you've got key takeaways to please pop them into the chat box if you got something different. But I wanted to summarize what we talked about is that fearless influence is about having impact through relationships and that fearless action. That influence effectiveness is better when you understand your natural style and adapt it to different situations. And that influence is an ongoing practice. So you're going to continue to get better at it throughout your career, throughout your life, and you can use it in lots of different places. If you've got a 3-word, 4-word takeaway of what you've learned so far today, if you'll pop it in the chat box, I'd like to see what you guys are taking away. Can we get Laura's email again? Yes. I'll give that to you. Right. Since we're waiting for these key takeaways.
While they're doing that, I just also want to tell you this is just my mind has just been so excited because it's actually you've got some visual and you have articulated so many good things on here that we can actually see and know how to. And you and I were talking about that before we started. It's great when people have all these wonderful ideas, but if you don't know how to communicate to everyone what to do, it's hard to apply it. You have nailed that today. Thank you so much, Laura. Very, very good.
Momentum's virtual trainings are made possible with the support of Protective Life, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, and America's Thrift. Find the full list of sponsors as well as additional resources for women leaders on our website at momentumleaders.org. Thanks for taking the time to invest in you, and remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. We love reading thoughts and comments, so you can leave those for us here too. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn by searching